Stephen A. Smith Show starts right now.
Number to call up as always is 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. The Stephen A. Smith Show on ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Pick from a range of coverage options with the Name Your Price tool to find a price that works for you. Also, tune in for college football action tomorrow as Syracuse hosts Clemson. Presented by Goodyear. Coverage begins at 6:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. By the way, have you ever had to miss a football game because you couldn't watch the game? That never has to happen again with TuneIn, your all-in-one audio app for live sports, news, music, and podcasts. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to live and on-demand coverage of every single game of the National Football League season. It's always great to have my next guest on the line, doing an outstanding job on the NFL. By the way, you can listen to him every weekday morning, 10 a.m., 1 p.m., ESPN Radio, 98.7 FM in New York City. He also makes a lot of appearances on Fox with my brother from another mother, my man Chris Carter, Nick Wright and the crew. First things first, Fox Sports during the morning time as well. I'm talking about NFL analyst extraordinaire, one of the best in the business, y'all, rising star in this business as far as I'm concerned. Somebody I want to hear, you understand, on television for us. The one and only Chris Canty is on the line with us right now. What's going on, big time? How are you, man?
I'm doing good, Stephen A. Appreciate you having me on. I haven't spoken to you since you did the interview with Michael Kay on Center Stage.
Right.
And I just want to say thank you for the endorsement that you gave me. You continue to break down barriers for us in the industry. And what I love about you is you always make sure to reach back and help somebody else out. So I want to say thank you for everything that you've done for me and for my career thus far.
Well, I appreciate it, but it's well-deserved, my man. I think you're one of the best in the business, and I'm happy to have you right here, right now. Let's get right into it because we got a whole bunch of NFL topics to get into. The New England Patriots, we have learned, will have Antonio Brown eligible for week 2 of this NFL season against Miami this weekend because the NFL announced that, or at least Adam Schefter broke the news, that the commissioner's list exempt list will not have Antonio Brown on it at this particular moment in time. As we all know, he's been accused of rape by a woman by the name of Brittany Taylor, his former trainer. And the NFL is scheduled to meet with her and interview her next week. And it appears that at least until then, the NFL will not act against Antonio Brown. Your thought upon hearing that news and your thoughts overall about Antonio Brown finding himself in a myriad of situations, this one obviously far more serious than the others he found himself in while an Oakland Raider. Your thoughts about this whole ordeal?
Well, here's the thing I'll say, Stephen A. I mean, I haven't liked all the noise that's been around Antonio Brown throughout the offseason, but the allegations from Ms. Taylor, this is a different level. This is something of a different nature. And so, appropriately, the NFL, the New England Patriots are taking these allegations seriously. And we have to let that process play out while the NFL does its investigation. But what I will say is this, in terms of Antonio Brown being available for the Patriots, I think that was the right move for the NFL to make because, again, we're talking about somebody being accused of something. Antonio Brown has not been charged with the crime. He has not been arrested. So, I think that it's important to understand that you're talking about a he said, she said situation. I don't think it's appropriate to take away somebody's opportunity to be on the job. I don't think it's appropriate to take away Antonio Brown's ability to play football when we're talking about something that has yet to be proved. Now, nonetheless, it's still disturbing to have something like this come out about a player. But since the NFL has not been able to speak to Ms. Taylor, I think they have an interview scheduled next week. I think the appropriate thing for the NFL to do was to allow Antonio Brown to play on Sunday down in Miami.
You know, it's interesting. I feel exactly the same way that you do. My other opinion about it, however, is that they shouldn't do a damn thing until they interview her. But if they interview her, I think one of a few things they have to take into consideration: how plausible is her story, how believable she is, and how far she's willing to take it. And the reason why I say that's very, very relevant from a business perspective, although it might turn people off, if you're the National Football League, you have to think about it from a business perspective in this regard. On one hand, you got to be prepared to deal with the Players Association, who's not going to be fighting on behalf of Antonio Brown. They're going to be fighting on behalf of a process because they don't want a precedent being set where he hasn't been charged, it's not a criminal offense, and you find yourself in a position to just exact a level of punishment against him that they would deem unfair, considering the absence of a process. But then there's the other thing they have to consider, is that if she is believable and they believe she's going to take this to the hilt, that this could possibly transform into a criminal case, then they have to consider the shield and the way the shield may be sullied with him being paraded all over the news, involved in such a circumstance. And under that sequence, I think it might be possible that they might put him on the commissioner's exempt list. Is that how you see this unfolding?
No, that's how I see it unfolding. And I think that the league office has to lean on NFL security to uncover the facts of all of these situations. Keep in mind, Antonio Brown does not deny having an intimate relationship with Brittany Taylor, but I think the disagreement comes with whether or not it's consensual. So I think that you have to interview Ms. Taylor. You have to see what she has to say, her account of the facts of the matter. But, in terms of the NFL's position, Roger Goodell is going to do what's best in terms of protecting the shield. And also keeping in mind, when the NFL investigated another high-profile case when it came to violence toward winning, that being Ezekiel Elliott a couple of years ago, and the situation that he had coming out of Ohio State, the investigator for the NFL interviewed the accuser and didn't find the accuser credible. That still didn't stop Roger Goodell from imposing discipline on Zeke. He still sat down for 6 games. So I think this is going to come down to the interview that takes place next week, and that'll determine whether or not Antonio Brown finds himself on the commissioner's exempt list.
Chris Canty right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Let's go to stuff, more innocuous things. Let's go to the world of football itself on the field. Minkah Fitzpatrick sought permission and captured it, seeking a trade from the Miami Dolphins. When you look at that situation and how it's unfolded in Miami, it seems pretty bizarre. They lose 59-10 to Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens last week. Lamar Jackson looking like the second coming of Joe Montana, fresh off a divisional playoff performance where he only completed 3 passes for 25 yards in the first 3 quarters in 2 minutes against the Chargers. Last time we saw him before last weekend. Yet he looks like the second coming of Joe Montana. They obliterate the Miami Dolphins. And you got guys on the Dolphins talking about the staff was basically trying to stink on purpose, meaning the coaches weren't game planning appropriately. What did you make of all of that?
Well, here's the thing. I don't think the Miami Dolphins players are in any position to make an argument about what the organization is trying to do. And the fact of the matter is, if the guys on that team would have played better, their head coach, Adam Gase, would not have been fired at the end of 2018. That being said, I do think it has to be frustrating in that locker room to recognize the priority for the organization is not necessarily trying to be as competitive as possible in 2019. Clearly, they're building for the future. If they weren't, they wouldn't have agreed to trade Laramie Tunsil to the Houston Texans for 2 first-round draft picks and a second-round draft pick, also packaging Kenny Stills in that deal. So I look at it from this standpoint. I think that those Dolphins players recognize it's going to be hard for them to be competitive from a talent standpoint, week in and week out. But that still shouldn't stop you from going out there and doing your job, because from an individual standpoint, your resume as a player is the film. And as they say in the NFL, the eye in the sky don't lie. So there still should be some motivation for those players to go out there and give their best effort and try to be as competitive as possible.
Chris Canty, let's transition to New York City. This is your home turf. You got your radio show, 98.7 FM, every weekday morning from 10 a.m. to noon. Let me ask you this. When you saw, when you sit up there and you think about this, we're looking at the New York Jets. And we have a situation right now where Sam Darnold goes down, and we wish him well. He was diagnosed with mononucleosis. Obviously, that's not something to joke about. He's going to be out for several weeks. Trevor Siemian is your backup quarterback. I'm thinking about it from the standpoint that the Jets are in a world of trouble. When you look at their schedule, they've got the Patriots twice. They've got the Eagles. They've got the Cowboys. I mean, when you look at their schedule, I mean, it's entirely plausible that after 7 weeks, they could end up 1-6 or 0-7 before all is said and done. How are we to look at the Jets this season?
Well, I'll say this, Stephen A. With Sam Darnold not being available for the next several weeks, it's getting late early for the New York Jets. I know a lot of people had them as one of the dark horse wild card teams out of the AFC, but I don't envision that anybody had a formula for them to be able to get one of those wild cards without winning one of the 2 home games that they had to start the season. I mean, they lost a heartbreaker in their regular season debut against the Buffalo Bills, a game where they had a 16-point lead in the second half, only to see that squandered away, especially after they lost C.J. Mosley on the defensive side of the ball with a groin injury. You could tell that unit just was not the same. And then on the offensive side of the ball, the offensive line had not taken a snap together all preseason, and that group struggled in week 1. So I don't envision it being any easier on Monday night going up against the Cleveland Browns. The Browns are a team that have a lot of talent. We talked about some of the offseason moves that they made, including acquiring Odell Beckham Jr. So this was one of those teams that everybody had high expectations for. But in looking at how they lost their regular season opener against the Tennessee Titans, that team is going to have an angry disposition about themselves because they're out to try to prove people wrong. So this is going to be a real tough game for the Jets on Monday night. And quite frankly, Stephen A., I'm having a hard time seeing a path to victory for Gang Green.
You know, it's interesting. One of the things I'm looking at is Odell Beckham Jr. coming out and voicing his concern about Greg Williams' defense, the defensive coordinator for the New York Jets, obviously formerly of Bountygate with New Orleans, where that got him suspended for an entire season. We've got a situation where he was the interim head coach and the defensive coordinator prior to that with the Cleveland Browns, not prior to New Orleans, but after New Orleans, but prior to this year. He was the defensive coordinator before Hugh Jackson got fired last year, and then he was the interim coach. But during a preseason game when he's defensive coordinator, that's one of the times where Odell Beckham Jr. had his season ravaged because he got hurt with a low hit or whatever. And now he speaks out about being concerned about Greg Williams. One would argue Greg Williams, a former psychology major in college, this is right up his alley. He's inside of Odell Beckham Jr.'s head, and it could potentially work against OBJ. What are your thoughts about that?
I thought it was a smart move by OBJ to be preemptive about it in terms of bringing some more awareness to the fact that you could have some guys on that Jets team potentially try to take some shots at him. Because let's face it, Stephen A., when you look at this Jets secondary, they're banged up. Tremaine Johnson, their number 1 corner, he's dealing with some hamstring injuries. And their second and third corners are suspect, to say the least. So, I mean, that secondary is going to have a hard time slowing down the skill position players for the Browns in the passing game. And then you couple that with the fact that the Jets don't have any premier edge rushers, guys that can consistently beat one-on-ones to get to the quarterback. I think it's going to be hard for that Jets defense to slow down that Browns passing attack just based on talent alone. So you're thinking that the Greg Williams-led New York Jets defense is going to have to do something outside of the ordinary in order to try to keep this game close. And so I think this is OBJ just trying to be proactive, just trying to draw attention from the officials to the fact that there might be some guys that try to take some shots on him and the rest of the skill position players for the Browns offense.
Chris Canty, NFL analyst extraordinaire, radio host as well, right here with Stephen A., ESPN Radio, ESPN News. By the way, Humpty and Canty awarded Outstanding Radio Show by the New York State Broadcasters Association just a few months ago, so congratulations on that. Let me get to your neck of the woods that's going to make you uncomfortable. By the way, the show is on from 10 to 1. I said 10 to noon a few minutes ago. I apologize. I said 10 to 1 several times, but I just got new because I was thinking about my lunch break, Chris Canty. You have to forgive me.
Come on, Stephen A., you know we the warm-up for you, man. We just getting the audience ready for you to go, man.
I was thinking about my lunch hour, man. My bad. Listen, let me get to the New York Giants for a second here because they just looked pathetic. I mean, you got Saquon Barkley, of course, but they literally look like they've got nothing else but Daniel Jones. And I think that it was a good sign if you're a Daniel Jones fan or if you are somebody that's pushing for the exit of Eli Manning that we saw Daniel Jones in the last 2 minutes of last week's game against the Dallas Cowboys. Some people would believe it's a bad sign and indicative of things to come. Where do you stand with all of that as it pertains to the New York Giants, and how bad do you expect them to be this season?
Well, here's the thing, Stephen A. We haven't seen a lot from Daniel Jones. I mean, there's only so much that you can put in reports. that are made in the preseason, and there's only so much stock you can put in performances in preseason games. But that being said, there's nothing that we've seen from a physical standpoint or from a mental toughness standpoint that would suggest that Daniel Jones can't play in the National Football League. There's nothing that would say that he wouldn't be a capable successor to Eli Manning. All of the criticism that came from the Giants drafting him with the 6th overall pick, I mean, the kid's handled it in stride, and he's been pure class. And so I don't look at it from a standpoint that the Giants, are somehow, some way, going to be in trouble if and when they have to hand the ball off from Eli Manning to Daniel Jones this season. I think Daniel Jones is the reason why the Giants would be interesting this season. When you draft a quarterback in the top 10, let's face it, you're a team that's rebuilding. And so to me, the Giants should do everything that they can to support the decision that they made earlier in April, which is to draft a successor for Eli Manning. This season isn't about the New York Giants trying to be competitive and getting to the postseason. This season is about making sure that you do everything you can as an organization to support the development of Daniel Jones. And in my opinion, that includes getting him some experience in regular season games, because the best way to improve as a football player is to play football in meaningful games. So to me, I just think that it's not if but when we see the torch pass from Eli Manning this season to Daniel Jones.
Chris Canty, let's stay in the NFC East. Who's the best team in the division? The Cowboys or the Eagles?
You know what, Stephen A., I got to go with the Cowboys. The last 10 games in the NFC East, they're 9-1, and they swept the Eagles last year. So although I think the Eagles have the better roster top to bottom, I do believe that styles make fights, and the Dallas Cowboys style, their overall philosophy and how they want to win games, is just a tough matchup for the Eagles. It really is. And so when you see the emergence of Dak Prescott as a passer, I think that's the part of it that actually takes you from just being a playoff team to a Super Bowl contender. That's the difference. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott is the best player on that team. He's the engine for that offense. But if you have Dak Prescott continuing to build on the performance that he had in Week 1 against the New York Giants, I mean, the rest of the league needs to look out, and that includes the Philadelphia Eagles, because we know, even though Philly's a really, really good team, the one place that they can get got is their cornerbacks in their secondary, Avonte Maddox and Ron Darby and Sidney Jones. Those guys, they still got a lot to prove, and they showed that in the first half of their opener against the Washington Redskins. So for me, right now, the way the Dallas Cowboys look, if Dak can continue to build on what he's done, you better watch out, because this Cowboys team would be for real.
Do you believe that the Dallas Cowboys are making a mistake by having not paid Dak Prescott yet, considering the fact that you took care of Ezekiel Elliott, La'el Collins, Jalen Smith?
Well, I'll say this, Stephen A., with each passing week, the price is going up. Because, I mean, Dak Prescott already wanted to get paid more than Carson Wentz, who got paid $32 million plus on an extension per year by Howie Roseman and the Eagles early this offseason. And then a couple of weeks ago, we saw that the Rams extended Jared Goff and gave him the highest guaranteed money total out of any quarterback in NFL history. So with that being said, those two quarterbacks that are a part of Dak's draft class, you got to think that Dak Prescott is going to want more money than those guys, because guess what? The next guy to get paid, usually the one that gets the more money. So I look at this situation with each passing week, the price tag for Dak Prescott continues to go up. The Cowboys need to go ahead and get that deal done.
You have the Cowboys as the best team in the NFC East. Who do you have as the best team in the NFC?
Well, Stephen, it's hard to make an argument against the New Orleans Saints, especially coming after that Monday night performance that they had where Drew Brees executed the 2-minute drill to perfection. But I'm still going to do it. To me, the team that has the potential to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl, it's the Green Bay Packers. Now, I know their offense didn't look great on Thursday night in the opener of the NFL season.
They got a new coach in Matt LaFleur. I mean, am I supposed to believe in him?
They got a new coach with Matt LaFleur. It was Aaron Rodgers' first time operating that offense against a defense in a different color jersey. But guess what did show up on that Thursday night?
What?
That Green Bay Packers defense. That Green Bay Packers defense showed up.
But it was hold on, Chris. But they were playing against Mitchell Trubisky, man. They don't have any real weapons in Chicago, I mean, listen, this is the guy that, you know what the biggest thing about Mitchell Trubisky is? They passed up on Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson to get him. That's it, Chris.
Stephen A., I hear what you're saying, but you're still talking about a top 10 scoring offense in the NFL a year ago and a team that won their division and hosted the home playoff game. So, I mean, listen, you have to respect the Chicago Bears. You just do. But here's what I will say. If that defense from Green Bay, which they've been building slowly but surely the last several off seasons, both through free agency and the draft, if those guys can continue to show up, if those guys can give that offense of the Packers time to catch up and understand what Matt LaFleur wants to do from a philosophy standpoint, then you better look out for these Green Bay Packers. And listen, they got a great test this weekend with the Minnesota Vikings. We know that defense is legit.
Yeah.
So it'll be great to see how they look after having an opportunity to have a regular season game with that first unit in place. But listen, Aaron Rodgers is a bad man. I know you say it all the time.
He's a bad man.
I have confidence that offense will figure it out. But the fact that defense looked as good as it did, I think you have to feel good about the Green Bay Packers this year.
All right, I need quick answers to these questions before we get on out of here because I only got a couple of minutes left. What's up with Cam Newton, man? I never thought he was an accurate passer, even though I think that he's an elite player when healthy. What's his issues? He didn't look good last night.
No, he didn't look good last night, and the offensive line didn't do him any favors, especially Darrell Williams and Taylor Mouton. Here's the thing, Stephen A. We talked about his throwing motion and how he's changed it. He wants more of an over-the-top delivery. But a little bit of our concern came is when he gets into an actual game, will he revert back to the Cam Newton that we've seen in the past? And so far this season, the answer has been yes. Now, it's a real shame that the Carolina Panthers didn't have a better sequence in the low red zone at the end of that game last night against the Bucs. But, I mean, it's a situation where their defense played well enough to keep them in the game. But at some point, Ron and Rivera and Norv Turner, as play callers, got to realize we got a 6'5", 250-pound quarterback. If it's fourth and less than a yard, we should maybe think about trying to use the quarterback sneak. I know they don't want to get him hurt, but if you're going to have him run on a design run in the third quarter, the run where he ended up fumbling, I think it's safe to say that you should probably consider using him as a runner when the game is on the line in that situation. But, yeah, the Carolina Panthers are in big trouble. To get out to an 0-2 start, we know that teams that start the season 0-2 have an 11% chance of making the playoffs. Carolina Panthers got big problems, and I don't see how they get this thing fixed because Cam Newton didn't look right, and that offensive line looked awful.
All right, I just need a winner in each of these games I'm going to ask you to pick. Seattle, Pittsburgh.
I like Seattle, Stephen A. I don't believe in the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. I like Seattle on the road. That Steelers pass defense looked awful. They couldn't get any pressure on Tom Brady, and the secondary couldn't match up in man-to-man coverage. Right. I think that Seattle does hit some big plays in the passing game against your Pittsburgh Steelers.
New Orleans at L.A.
I like New Orleans on the road. I think they're going to try to exact some revenge. They're going to use that NFC Championship loss as a little bit of a motivating factor, but I just believe that New Orleans is the better team this year.
Philadelphia at Atlanta.
I like Philadelphia. I mean, Stephen A., at some point you are where you are. You saw the last three games that these two teams have played. The Eagles have beaten them, and not just on the scoreboard, but I think physically beaten up the Atlanta Falcons. I don't think the Atlanta Falcons are who they think they are. They want to be a tough, rugged bunch under Dan Quinn, but they're not that when they see that Philadelphia Eagles green. I like the Eagles on the road.
Chris Canty, co-host, Humpty and Canty, every weekday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., 98.7 FM, ESPN Radio, New York City, plus doing an outstanding job. Fox Sports, First Things First with my brother Chris Carter, the one and only Chris Canty right here, rising star in this business. Appreciate you, my brother. Thank you so much. See you down the road.
I appreciate it, Stephen A.
All right, the one and only Chris Canty right here with Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News, 888-SAY-ESPN. That is the number to call up. That's 888-729-3776. You are listening live to Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Back with your calls and more in a minute. By the way, go to the Home Depot to add personality and style to your room with a